You were never supposed to know this. This story wasn't meant to surface. It was supposed to die in silence, just like she did. Imagine a girl, no name on her birth certificate, no school record, no social security number. A phantom born in flesh, bred in secrecy, buried in whispers. She was born in the basement of a crumbling farmhouse on the outskirts of Buckhannon, West Virginia. Her mother was 16. Her father was also her grandfather. She lived for only 6 years, and no one reported her death. Her bones were found 2 decades later, wrapped in a mold-eaten blanket behind a false wall, curled up like something too shameful to mourn. No photos, no police file, just a forensic report marked indeterminate trauma. But this child wasn't an anomaly. She was a product, a consequence, the outcome of generations of silence and sanctioned rot. America has its myths, apple pie, freedom, football Sundays. But peel back the flag and you find something else underneath. A kingdom built on blood ties too close, rituals never spoken aloud, and institutions that turn away when the screams got too hard to explain. The history books talk about progress, but they never mention the towns where everyone shares a last name. They never ask why some families refuse visitors, why certain counties have rates of genetic disorders higher than anywhere else in the Western world. This isn't folklore. This is geography, power, proximity, and a kind of psychological prison passed down like heirlooms. The names change, but the silence stays the same. Because America's dirtiest family secrets don't just belong to the poor or the rural. They're etched into our systems, our medicine, our churches, our laws. The abuse of bloodlines is not a Southern thing, not a backwoods thing. It's a human thing. And in this country, it was once protected by land deeds, pulpits, and pedigree. You're going to hear things in this video that will disturb you. But if you're still watching, part of you already suspects the truth, that something has always been off, something older than policy, more corrosive than politics, a shadow that stretches back across generations, so familiar it became invisible. They say every family has skeletons in the closet, but what they don't say is that some closets go all the way down into the foundations of America itself, that you've heard of the Appalachian enclaves, the whispered stories of the Whitakers, the Fugits, the backwoods bloodlines. But this isn't about hillbilly caricatures or viral TikToks of grunting men. That's misdirection, a sideshow for the masses. The real story is far older and far more controlled. You see, family secrecy has always been a tool of dominance. Not just by individuals, but by institutions. In colonial Virginia, cousin marriages were legal, encouraged. It kept land within blood, consolidated wealth, ensured loyalty. For the elites, incest wasn't deviance, it was strategy. An empire built not by love, but by lineage. And when those bloodlines got corrupted, when deformities appeared, when children were born broken by biology, the solution was never to stop. It was to hide. Doctors were paid to lie on certificates. Midwives were sworn to secrecy. The churches, don't get me started. They preached purity, but baptized children born from fathers who were also uncles. Forgiveness, they said, forgiveness, as long as the family name stayed clean on paper. That's the pattern. Obscure the truth. Maintain the image. Let the victims rot behind closed doors. And the government? Complicit. Every time a census was altered to mask multiple generations living under one roof. Every time a child with severe genetic defects was listed as unschooled or simple instead of what they really were, sacrifices to a cult of control. Because incest isn't just taboo. It's a mechanism, a loop of power where the victim and the abuser share the same DNA, and therefore the same silence. It destroys the body, yes. But more than that, it destroys the ability to speak out. When you're born into a system that breaks your mind before it lets you walk, you can't rebel. You can't even describe what's happening to you. And that's the real secret. Not the sex, not the deformities, but the silence. The engineered inability to expose what's being done. We talk about trauma as if it's accidental. But in these stories, trauma is inherited by design. The damage becomes destiny. A child becomes a warning no one is allowed to say out loud. By now, you're probably thinking, how could this go on for so long without anyone stopping it? But that's the wrong question. You should be asking, who made sure it didn't stop? Let me tell you a story from deep in Alabama coal country. 1967, a girl named Elise was born with fused fingers, no upper lip, and a mind that never progressed past infancy. Her mother was barely 15. The father? Officially unknown, but everyone in the church congregation knew it was her stepfather. Her mother's father, a deacon, a war veteran, a Freemason. Elise was buried before her 4th birthday. Cause of death listed as pneumonia. But the real cause? 30 years of unbroken abuse passed down through men who all wore the same last name, all had the same handshake, all showed up to Sunday service and sat in the front pew. No one intervened. Why would they? The sheriff hunted with those men. The preacher drank with them. The coroner owed them favors. Elise didn't stand a chance. She was never meant to. That's the part no one wants to face. These aren't isolated incidents. This isn't some fringe subculture. This is a network, an ecosystem of complicity. Entire counties where the power structure is built not on votes or money, but on blood. The closer the blood, the tighter the control. It's not just the Appalachian Mountains. It's not just Texas backroads. It's parts of Arkansas, Utah, the Florida Panhandle, rural California. Places where secrets are currency and children are collateral. And when the damage gets too visible, when the deformities become too grotesque to ignore, they get sent away. Institutions, care homes, state-run facilities with white walls and locked doors. The public sees a child with brain damage. What they never see is the family that broke her, the system that enabled it, the church that sanctified it, the government that ignored it. Because if you dig just deep enough, you'll realize something terrifying. The American family unit has always been a sacred lie. A lie designed to protect those who use lineage as a weapon. A lie that teaches obedience over awareness. And a lie that silences the ones born too damaged to ever reveal what really happened behind closed doors. There's a phrase you need to remember now. Type it twice in the comments and let it burn into your mind like a brand. Blood is not purity. Blood is not purity. Because if you think heritage equals holiness, you've already fallen under the spell. This illusion that bloodlines are noble, that family is always sacred, is the most dangerous propaganda you were ever fed. It starts early. Fairy tales, royal families, pedigrees. You're told that closeness is safety, that family is destiny. But what happens when that closeness turns toxic? When it becomes a mirror loop, trapping you in a pattern you can't break because it feels like home? That's how psychological control works. It doesn't beat you into submission. It seduces you with identity. It wraps the chains around your name, your birthright, your reflection. You grow up thinking the cage is your inheritance. In elite circles, they've known this for centuries. Look at the royal families of Europe. Look at the old Southern dynasties. The Astors, the DuPonts, the Rockefellers. You think it was just about wealth? No, it was about genetic control. Marriages weren't about love. They were blood contracts. Mergers of DNA designed to maintain mental dominance OV. Mental dominance over every generation that followed. The poor mimicked it. The religious normalized it. And the state looked away because they needed obedient citizens who didn't ask too many questions about power, biology, or origin. This is why so many of the victims you've heard about, Gracie, Laureen, Rita, were female. Because women in these systems aren't just children. They're vessels. They are bred, sometimes literally, to carry forward the blood, even when that blood is poison. You think this ended in the 1800s? No, it's still happening. Right now, in closed communities, isolated compounds, even suburban homes where traditional values hide rot under Sunday smiles. This isn't about judgment. It's about awareness. And once you awaken to this pattern, you can never unsee it. Now we go deeper. Let's talk about the silence industry. Every time one of these stories makes it into the light, what do you notice? The press reports it briefly. Maybe a podcast episode. Maybe a documentary tucked away on page 6 of a streaming site. but then it disappears. It vanishes like a ghost swallowed by fog. You want to know why? Because behind every one of these families is a machine that profits from invisibility. I'm talking about institutions built to contain and erase the aftermath of generational abuse. Medical centers that mark children as nonverbal instead of incest survivors. Churches that offer counseling instead of exposure. State agencies that shuffle cases into endless backlog files so no one connects the dots. These children don't just suffer. They become data points in a system designed to forget them. A national game of gaslight and vanish. Take Rita's case. You heard about her earlier. Born from a father-daughter pairing. Diagnosed with neurological collapse by age 5. But what you didn't hear is that her initial records disappeared after the care facility received private donations. Money tied to a church group that had no name and no digital footprint. When an investigative journalist tried to follow up years later, they were told she had relocated. No forwarding information, no legal trail. Gone. Do you really believe that was accidental? There's a hidden layer to this society that doesn't run on law. It runs on legacy. And when legacy is threatened by exposure, the system moves fast. Faster than justice. Faster than truth. The sad part? Most people don't want to believe this. Because to accept it means acknowledging that everything they were taught about family, faith, and the American ideal is soaked in a lie. But you're not most people. You're still here. And that means you're ready for what comes next. The final transformation begins when you understand this. The real virus isn't incest. It's obedience. Obedience to family, to tradition, to the lie that says blood is thicker than truth. That's what keeps this nightmare alive. Generation after generation. Abuse rebranded as loyalty. Silence disguised as honor. But what if you broke it? What if you were the one who stepped out of the loop? Meant like you were never meant to hear these stories. Because once you do, you stop seeing family as a sanctuary. You start seeing it for what it often is, a fortress built to protect power, not people. And here's the hardest truth of all. These stories you've heard tonight, they're not rare. They're not exceptions. They're indicators, cracks in the surface of a much larger structure, one that runs deeper than religion, deeper than law. A system that says, keep in the family, protect the bloodline, serve the name. You want to know how elites rule across time? Through inheritance, not just of money, but of silence, of control, of identities shaped by fear and shame. It ends when you stop obeying the script, and when you stop mistaking family for salvation. You were born into a world already covered in veils. They told you to honor your elders, to protect your blood, to believe in the stories passed down at the dinner table. But you were never told what to do when those stories were rotten, when the elders were predators, when the blood was cursed. Now you know, this knowledge is dangerous, not because it's false, but because it's real, and because it leaves you with no excuse to stay asleep. You can't unhear what you've heard tonight. You've walked through graveyards of memory, past homes built on broken children, past churches built on crushed voices. The question is, what will you do with it? Some will run. They always do. Back to their comfort, back to their myths. But some will stay. Some will write, blood is not purity in the comments. Twice. Not for clicks, but as a ritual. A marking. A sign that they've crossed a line and won't go back. You've been shown the truth. Not all of it, but enough to feel the fracture. And enough to know that in this country, the deepest horrors don't come from monsters. They come from fathers. They come from homes. They come from the silence we call family.